The rain-slicked streets of Milford gleamed under the sodium glow of streetlights, a forgotten corner of the Midwest where the hospital's emergency wing stood like a weary sentinel. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and stale coffee, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Sarah Klein, a nurse with calloused hands and eyes shadowed by 12-hour shifts, knelt beside a man sprawled on the linoleum floor. He was a biker. That much was clear from the leather vest clinging to his broad frame, the intricate tattoos snaking up his arms like ancient runes, symbols of battles fought and promises etched in ink. Blood seeped from a gash on his forehead, and his breathing came in ragged bursts. But it was the way he clutched a faded photograph in his fist that twisted something deep in Sarah's chest. The picture showed a younger version of him, arm around a boy no older than 10, both grinning against a dusty horizon. She'd found him slumped against the ER doors just after midnight, his motorcycle a twisted wreck in the parking lot, as if he'd ridden through hell itself to get there. "Easy now," Sarah murmured, pressing gauze to the wound, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. The man, Jacob Harlan, he'd gasped before blacking out, muttered something about a promise, a debt unpaid from years ago. Sarah didn't pry. In her line of work, secrets were as common as the beeps of monitors. But as she worked, the charge nurse, a stern woman named Margaret with a clipboard clutched like a shield, stormed in. "What is this? We don't treat vagrants here without insurance. Call security. Get him out." Sarah's head snapped up, rain from her uncapped hair dripping onto the floor. "He's hurt, Margaret. Concussion, at least. We can't just—" "Protocol!" Margaret snapped, her voice echoing off the sterile walls. "He's one of those Iron Oath riders. Trouble follows them like exhaust. Board says no more charity cases, especially not bikers with records." The words hung heavy, laced with the town's old prejudices, whispers of the motorcycle club that rolled through Milford like thunder, protecting the overlooked but scaring the suits in City Hall. Sarah glanced at Jacob's face, pale against the ink of his tattoos, and saw not a criminal, but a man broken by something deeper than the crash. She'd lost her own brother to a similar wreck years back, a veteran who'd ridden to escape the ghosts of war. This felt personal, an echo of that old ache. Security arrived, 2 burly orderlies in ill-fitting uniforms, hauling Jacob toward the exit despite Sarah's protests. She followed, arguing, her scrubs soaked and clinging. "This is wrong. He's stable. He needs observation." But Margaret's call to the administrator sealed it. By dawn, Sarah was in the office, her badge yanked from her chest. "You're fired," the administrator said flatly, avoiding her eyes. "For insubordination. We can't afford the liability." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Sarah in the empty hallway, the weight of her dismissal heavier than the rain outside. She stepped into the parking lot, the chill biting through her thin jacket, and wondered if honoring her own code of care had just cost her everything. Word spread through the undercurrents of Milford like exhaust fumes, quiet calls on encrypted lines. The low hum of loyalty that bound the Iron Oath tighter than blood. Jacob Harlan wasn't just any rider. He was the club's enforcer, a man who'd sworn an oath 20 years ago to protect those who stood for the forgotten. The crash? A setup, whispers said. Corrupt cops from the edge of town, men in badges who'd been shaking down locals for years, targeting the club to cover their tracks. Jacob had been chasing a lead on a missing kid, a boy from the trailer parks, whose family the oath had vowed to shield after the father's overdose. But the ambush came swift. Headlights in the rear view, a spike strip across the road, and Jacob's bike flipping into the guardrail. By the time the sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and golds, the first engines rumbled on the outskirts. Ethan Crow, the club's president, a grizzled veteran with a salt and pepper beard and scars from desert sands, got the call at his roadside diner. "They tossed Harlan like trash," the informant said, voice low over the crackle of the line. "And the nurse who helped him fired on the spot." Ethan's fist tightened around his coffee mug, the ceramic cracking faintly. He'd known Jacob since their army days, brothers forged in fire, bound by a promise made over a foxhole. Never leave a man behind, no matter the cost. Sarah Klein's face flashed in the report. A single mother, scraping by, now blacklisted in a town that chewed up the good ones. The convoy assembled silently like shadows coalescing. 50 bikes at first, then more. Veterans from the old guard, mechanics with grease-stained hands, even a few women riders who'd earned their patches through grit. They gathered at the old mill, engines idling low, the vibration thrumming through the earth like a heartbeat. Ethan stood at the front, his voice cutting through the murmur. Harlan took a hit for that kid, and this nurse? She stood when others walked. We ride for them, for the oath. Nods rippled through the group, helmets glinting in the dawn light. No guns, no rage, just the weight of honor, a promise that had survived bar fights, betrayals, and the slow rot of time. Sarah sat on her porch steps that morning, nursing a mug of instant coffee, the eviction notice from her landlord crumpled in her pocket. The hospital's betrayal stung, but it was the fear for Jacob that gnawed at her, the way he'd whispered about a boy in danger before passing out. She hadn't signed up for this, but walking away felt like betraying the part of herself that still believed in doing right. Then, distant at first, like thunder rolling in from the plains, the roar built. She looked up as the first wave crested the hill, a sea of chrome and leather, engines snarling in unison, dust kicking up in swirling clouds. They poured into Milford's main street, a river of steel that made windows rattle and pedestrians freeze. The lead bike pulled up to her curb, Ethan dismounting with a nod that carried the gravity of mountains. Sarah Klein? His voice was gravel rough, but his eyes held a quiet respect. She stood, heart pounding. We heard what they did. Harlan's one of ours. You helped him. That's a debt we repay. Behind him the convoy idled, a wall of unwavering loyalty, the scent of hot metal and rain mingling in the air. Sarah's breath caught. This wasn't vengeance, but something purer, a stand for the overlooked, a promise fulfilled in the face of a town's corruption. As the engines revved again, shaking the very foundations of the sleepy streets, she realized her quiet act of kindness had ignited a force that would change everything. The ride had just begun, and Milford would never be the same. If you're watching this, hit that like button. If you've ever stood up for what's right, even when it cost you, your support keeps these stories rolling. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across Sarah's cracked porch, where the air still hummed with the low growl of idling engines. The convoy stretched down the block like a living barrier, chrome accents catching the light in sharp glints, the scent of warmed leather and exhaust weaving through the neighborhood's usual quiet. Sarah's mug trembled in her hand, the coffee long gone cold, as Ethan Crowe stood before her, his presence solid as the oak tree shading her modest yard. Behind him, the riders waited, silent sentinels in vests patched with the Iron Oath emblem, a stylized chain linking fists that symbolized unbreakable bonds forged in the fires of forgotten wars. You don't know us, Ethan said, his voice low and measured like gravel under tires. But Harlan does. He rode through the night chasing shadows for a kid named Tommy, 10 years old, lost in the wrong hands because his folks couldn't fight the system anymore. We promised that family we'd watch over him after the father went down. Jacob was closing in when they hit him. Ethan's eyes, weathered by sun and sorrow, met hers without flinching. Sarah felt the weight of it, the unspoken layers. Not just a crash, but a deliberate strike from those who wore badges but traded in fear. The town's underbelly had always simmered, small-time shakedowns turning into something uglier, whispers of officials pocketing protection money from the vulnerable. Jacob's pursuit had poked that nest. Sarah swallowed, glancing at the riders. One, a woman with silver-streaked hair tied back under her helmet. nodded faintly from her bike, her expression a mix of resolve and quiet empathy. "I treated him like anyone else," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "What they did, firing me, dumping him, it's not right." The words hung between them, simple but charged, echoing the oath she'd taken as a nurse, to heal without question. Losing her job had stripped away the thin veil of security she'd built for her daughter, Lily, who was inside now, peeking through the curtains with wide eyes. But walking away from this felt like abandoning the boy in the photo Jacob had clutched, the one that mirrored her own losses. Ethan stepped closer, pulling a worn envelope from his vest pocket. "This is for you. Harlan wanted you to have it if things went south." She took it, her fingers brushing the rough paper, and unfolded the contents. A handwritten note in Jacob's scrawled hand, edges frayed like the man himself. "To the one who stops the bleed, I owe you my road ahead. The oath repays in full. Keep the light on for the lost." Tucked inside was a small iron medallion, engraved with the same chain motif, cool against her palm. It wasn't money or threats, just a token, heavy with meaning. Sarah's throat tightened. In her world of charts and IV drips, gestures like this were rare, a reminder that honor still breathed in the cracks of a cynical town. As she pocketed the medallion, a distant siren wailed, slicing through the rumble. Heads turned toward the sound, coming from the direction of the hospital. "They're moving fast," muttered a rider nearby, his hand instinctively checking the handlebars. Ethan mounted his bike with fluid grace, the engine coughing to life beneath him. "The suits know we're here, but we don't ride for show. We ride for answers. About Tommy, about Harlan. You in, Sarah? Your word could sway the scales." She hesitated, the eviction notice burning in her pocket, the fear of dragging Lily into this storm. But the roar of the bikes called to something dormant, a spark of the fighter her brother had seen in her before the roads claimed him. "Show me where he is," she said finally, grabbing her jacket. And that kid, the convoy surged forward as one, a thunderous wave that parted the morning traffic like a bow through water. Sarah climbed onto the back of Ethan's bike, her arms wrapping around his waist for balance, the vibration traveling up her spine like a pulse. They led the pack toward the hospital, engines harmonizing in a deep bass that echoed off brick facades and rattled loose panes. Milford awoke to the spectacle, shopkeepers pausing mid-sweep, children pressing noses to windows, the air thick with the tang of ozone from the exhaust. No one cheered or jeered. It was a procession, solemn and unyielding, the dust from their tires swirling like ghosts of old battles. At the hospital lot, the scene unfolded in stark relief. Jacob's wrecked bike had been towed, but yellow tape fluttered around the spot like a mocking banner. Security milled about, radios crackling, while Margaret hovered near the entrance, her clipboard now a futile shield against the tide. The administrator, a slick-haired man named Victor Hale, emerged from the doors, face paling as the bikes formed a crescent around the parking area. Ethan killed his engine first, the silence sudden and oppressive, broken only by the tick of cooling metal. "We're here for our brother," he called out, voice carrying like a judge's gavel, "and the truth about the boy he was after." Hale straightened his tie, sweat beading on his brow. "This is private property. You have no right." But Sarah dismounted, stepping forward with the medallion glinting in her fist. "You have every right. You threw out a man in need and cost me my job for helping. Tommy's family came to me months ago, scared of the protection fees from your friends in blue. Jacob knew. That's why they ran him off the road." Murmurs rippled through the riders, their loyalty a tangible force, eyes locked on Hale like hawks on prey. The administrator faltered, glancing at Margaret, who avoided his gaze. Inside the building, through the glass doors, Sarah caught a glimpse of Jacob, propped in a side room, bandaged but alert, his eyes finding hers with a nod of gratitude. But the real shadow loomed larger. Reports, filtering through the Oath's network, placed Tommy in a run-down foster home on the town's edge. guarded by the same corrupt hands that had targeted Jacob. Hale's phone buzzed insistently, and he stepped aside, whispering urgently. The standoff stretched, tension coiling like a spring, the sun now beating down on helmets and leather alike. As the first patrol car crested the hill, lights flashing without sirens, Ethan raised a hand, signaling calm. This wasn't about clashes, it was about exposing the rot, fulfilling the promise that had drawn them all here. Sarah felt the medallion warm against her skin, a quiet vow amid the gathering storm. The bikes revved once, a warning rumble that shook the ground, promising that the ride for justice had only just accelerated. Milford's secrets were unraveling, thread by thread, and the oath would see it through to the dawn. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments they reach you. The patrol cars screeched to a halt at the hospital's perimeter, gravel spitting from under their tires like angry whispers, their red and blue lights pulsing against the midday glare. Dust hung in the air, thick and golden, mingling with the acrid bite of overheated brakes and the ever-present tang of motorcycle exhaust. Ethan Crowe remained motionless on his bike, his broad shoulders squared under the worn leather of his vest, the iron oath patch catching the sun like a badge of quiet defiance. Around him, the riders formed an unyielding arc, engines silent now, but ready to awaken at a word, their faces shadowed under helmets that gleamed with the polish of hands that knew hard labor. Sarah stood at the edge of the group, the iron medallion heavy in her pocket, its edges pressing into her thigh like a reminder of the line she'd crossed, from healer to witness in a fight she hadn't chosen. Victor Hale backed toward the hospital doors, his polished shoes scuffing the asphalt, phone still clutched to his ear as if it could summon salvation. The officers emerged from their cruisers, 3 men in crisp uniforms, badges glinting falsely under the sun, hands hovering near holsters that spoke of authority bought cheap. The lead cop, a stocky figure named Harlan Tate with a mustache that hid a perpetual sneer, scanned the convoy with eyes narrowed against the light. "Disperse now," he barked, voice amplified by the bullhorn in his grip, echoing off the building's facade. "This is an unlawful assembly. Clear the lot or face charges." But his gaze flickered to Hale, a subtle nod passing between them, the kind that betrayed alliances forged in backroom deals rather than oaths of service. Sarah's pulse thrummed in her ears, louder than the distant hum of traffic on the highway. She could see Jacob through the glass doors, his silhouette shifting as a nurse adjusted his IV, his tattooed arm flexing weakly against the restraints they'd no doubt added for safety. The sight fueled her resolve. This wasn't just about a job lost or a man injured. It was the web of silence that had snared Tommy, the boy whose frightened eyes she'd glimpsed in a faded clinic photo months ago. His mother had come to the ER one rainy night, bruises hidden under long sleeves, whispering about fees demanded by men who promised protection but delivered chains. Jacob had been the one to follow up, his promise to the oath pulling him into the shadows where the town's rot festered. Ethan dismounted slowly, his boots thudding against the pavement with deliberate weight, raising a hand to signal his crew to hold. "No trouble here, officer," he said, his tone even like the calm before a storm breaks over open plains. "We're just asking questions about our brother Jacob Harlan, left bleeding on your watch, and a kid named Tommy, last seen in a foster setup that's more cage than care." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the officers. Tate's face tightened, a vein pulsing at his temple, but he didn't advance. Whispers among the riders stirred, stories of Tate's crew shaking down trailer parks, turning a blind eye to the vulnerable for a cut of the fear. The oath had long suspected it, but Jacob's crash was the spark, proof in twisted metal and spilled blood. Sarah stepped forward, her scrubs still bearing faint stains from the night's chaos, the fabric stiff with dried rain. "I was there," she called out, voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. They dragged him out half-conscious. No scan, no records, just gone. And Tommy's family, they begged for help from people like you and got threats instead. Her words drew murmurs from the gathering crowd, hospital staff peering from windows, locals drawn by the standoff, phones held high to capture the moment. Hale sputtered from the doorway, "She's dismissed, unreliable witness." But the damage was done. Eyes turned to him, questioning the man who'd traded mercy for memos. Tate lowered the bullhorn, exchanging glances with his partners, the air thickening with unspoken calculations. "This ain't your rodeo, Crow," he growled, stepping closer, the scent of cheap aftershave cutting through the exhaust. "Your club's been warned. Stay out of town business." Ethan's response was a faint smile, etched with the scars of old wounds, both seen and unseen. "Our business is promises kept. Harlan swore to protect that boy after his dad couldn't. We all did, back when wars left us piecing together what's left of family." The admission hung heavy, a thread pulling at the officers' facades. One of them, younger, shifted uncomfortably, his grip loosening on his radio. In the oath, loyalty wasn't tattooed, it was lived, in rides through blizzards for stranded brothers, in quiet vigils for the lost. As the sun beat down, turning the lot into a furnace of reflected heat, a new sound pierced the standoff, the wail of an ambulance siren approaching from the east. It pulled up sharply, doors flying open to reveal paramedics wheeling a gurney toward the entrance, but atop it lay not a patient, but evidence. Tommy's mother, pale and trembling, her arm in a makeshift sling, eyes wide with desperation. She'd been found wandering the trailer park edges, mumbling about the men in blue who'd come for her son under cover of night. The paramedics, one a quiet oath affiliate with a hidden patch under his uniform, had scooped her up on a tip. "She needs real care," the lead medic said, voice firm as he locked eyes with Hale. "Not the kind that gets buried in paperwork." Chaos erupted in slow motion. Hale barking orders, Tate's team hesitating as the crowd swelled, phones capturing every flinch. Sarah rushed to the gurney's side, her nurse's instincts overriding fear, checking the woman's vitals with steady hands. "It's okay," she whispered, brushing sweat-damp hair from the woman's forehead. "You're safe now." The mother clutched Sarah's arm, gasping. "They took him, said it was for his own good, but Jacob knew. He was coming to stop it." Tears carved tracks through the dust on her cheeks, a raw testament to the promises broken by those sworn to uphold them. Ethan seized the moment, his voice rising like a rallying horn. "See this? This is what your protection buys, fear in the eyes of the innocent. We're not leaving till Harlan's cleared and that boy's found." The riders revved their engines in unison, a deep, resonant growl that vibrated through chests and rattled the patrol car's windows, dust devils swirling at their feet. Tate backed toward his cruiser, radioing for backup, but the doubt in his posture was clear. The oath's presence wasn't a threat of fists, but of truth, unyielding as the chains on their vests. Sarah watched as the ambulance doors closed, the siren fading into the distance, carrying hope, wrapped in urgency. The medallion in her pocket felt warmer, a talisman against the gathering clouds on the horizon. This confrontation was merely the fork in the road. Deeper shadows lay ahead, in the foster homes and back alleys where Tommy hid. But with the oath at her back, Sarah sensed the shift, a family chosen in the heat of the moment, bound by the same quiet honor that had drawn her to Jacob's side. As the first drops of rain spattered the asphalt, promising a cleansing storm, the convoy held firm, engines purring like guardians awakened. The unraveling had accelerated, and justice, long deferred, revved toward its reckoning. The rain came down in sheets now, turning the hospital parking lot into a shimmering black mirror that reflected the flashing patrol lights like fractured stars. Water cascaded off helmets and leather vests, pooling around the tires of the Iron Oath convoy, where the engines idled with a subdued rumble, like the growl of a beast held in check. Sarah Klein wiped the rain from her eyes, her jacket sodden and heavy, as she stood beside the ambulance's fading tail lights. Tommy's mother had been whisked inside under the watchful eyes of the Oath-affiliated paramedics, her frail form a stark reminder of the human cost woven into this standoff. The woman's words echoed in Sarah's mind. They took him, said it was for his own good, a desperate plea that twisted like a knife, pulling at the threads of her own unresolved grief for a brother lost to indifferent roads. Ethan Crowe remounted his bike with a nod to Sarah, water streaming from his beard in rivulets that traced the lines of old scars. "She's stabled for now," he said over the patter of rain, his voice barely rising above the downpour. "But Tommy's out there, in one of those so-called safe houses on the east side." Harlan's intel pointed to a place called Willow Ridge, run by the county, but we know whose pockets it's lining. The name hung in the air, a whisper of corruption that the Oath had chased for months. Willow Ridge wasn't a haven. It was a warehouse for the overlooked, where kids like Tommy vanished into paperwork and payoffs, shielded by badges that bent for the right price. Jacob had ridden into the ambush, closing in on proof, a ledger of donations funneled from foster funds to Tate's crew. The officers regrouped at the edge of the lot, Harlan Tate barking orders into his radio, his uniform darkening under the relentless rain. Backup was en route, cruisers cutting through the storm from the precinct. But the Oath held their ground, a wall of dripping chrome and unyielding resolve. One rider, a wiry veteran named Lucas Reed, with tattoos mirroring Jacob's, faded eagles from their shared service days, leaned toward Sarah from his saddle. "You got heart, Mom. Reminds me of my sister, back when she patched us up after patrols. This ride, it's for all the ones who can't." His words were simple, laced with the quiet faith of men who'd rebuilt lives from the rubble of war, choosing family in the roar of engines rather than the silence of regret. Sarah nodded, the medallion in her pocket now slick with moisture, its weight an anchor against the chaos. She glanced back at the hospital doors, where Victor Hale had retreated like a shadow, his earlier bluster dissolved in the downpour. Inside, Jacob was fighting his own battle, monitors beeping steadily, but whispers from a sympathetic orderly confirmed the restraints and the observation that felt more like containment. Sarah's firing replayed in her mind, the badge torn away not for error, but for empathy in a system that prized procedure over people. It fueled her steps as she approached Ethan again. "Take me to Willow Ridge. If Tommy's there, I can get him out. Nurse's credentials or not, I've seen enough to know when a kid's in real danger." Ethan's eyes assessed her, rain blurring the edges of his gaze. Then he revved his engine once, a signal that rippled through the convoy. "Mount up. We move quiet. No storming the gates. Truth first, then the ride." The bikes came alive in a staggered wave, headlights piercing the grey veil like lanterns in fog, tires hissing over wet asphalt as they peeled away from the hospital. Sarah climbed behind Ethan, her arms locking around him for stability, the world blurring into streaks of neon and shadow. The convoy snaked through Milford's rain-lashed streets, past shuttered diners and flickering billboards, the downpour masking their approach like a conspirator. Locals peered from porches, sensing the shift in the air. A procession not of outlaws, but of guardians, their loyalty a force as elemental as the storm itself. Willow Ridge loomed on the town's ragged fringe, a squat brick building ringed by chain link and overgrown weeds, its windows glowing faintly against the tempest. Floodlights cut through the rain, casting long, wavering shadows that danced like uneasy spirits. The oath pulled up short, engines cutting to a hush in the tree line, where the scent of wet earth and pine mingled with the faint institutional tang of bleach wafting from the vents. Ethan dismounted first, gesturing for a small team. Lucas, the silver-haired woman rider named Grace Harlan, no relation to Jacob but bound by the same oath, and Sarah to follow on foot. The rest held position, a silent perimeter, their presence a promise of support without escalation. They slipped through the shadows, rain drumming on the fence like impatient fingers, until they reached a side gate half hidden by foliage. Grace, with her mechanic's precision, worked the lock with a tool from her pocket, the click lost in the storm. Inside, the grounds were eerily still, puddles reflecting the dim security lights. Sarah's heart raced as they crept toward the main building, her mind flashing to Lily at home, safe with a neighbor but waiting for a mother who now chased justice through the night. "Tommy's room is second floor, east wing," Ethan murmured, relaying Jacob's last fragmented intel. "Foster logs show him checked in 2 days ago, after his mom resisted another fee." A side door creaked open under Grace's hand, leading into a dimly lit hallway that smelled of overcooked meals and despair. Footsteps echoed faintly from deeper within, night staff making rounds, but the group moved like ghosts, hugging walls painted in peeling institutional beige. Sarah led now, her knowledge of such places guiding them past a nurse's station, where a lone attendant dozed over a crossword, oblivious. Up the stairs, the air grew heavier, laced with the quiet sobs of children behind closed doors, each one an indictment of the system that had failed them. They found Tommy's room at the end of the hall, door ajar, a nightlight casting warm pools on the floor. The boy huddled on the bed, knees drawn to his chest, eyes wide and haunted in the low light. He was smaller than the photo suggested, his face streaked with the remnants of tears, a bruise blooming faintly on his cheek, signs of rough handling, not play. "Who—" he started, voice cracking, but Sarah knelt swiftly, her presence a balm. "It's okay, Tommy. I'm Sarah from the clinic. Your mum's safe, and we're here to take you to her." The boy's gaze darted to Ethan and the others, fear warring with hope. But something in their steady eyes, the echo of promises kept, eased him. He nodded, clutching a worn stuffed bear as Grace scooped him up. Alarms blared suddenly, shrill and piercing, as if the building itself sensed the intrusion. Lights flickered on overhead, flooding the hall with harsh fluorescence. Tate's voice boomed from an intercom. "Secure the premises! Intruders!" Footsteps pounding from the lower levels. The group bolted, Tommy in Grace's arms, down a back stairwell, slick with rain seepage. Outside, the storm raged fiercer, lightning cracking the sky as they burst through the gate. Ethan whistled sharply, and the convoy roared to life, engines thundering like avenging thunder, headlights sweeping the grounds to cover their escape. Sarah ran beside Lucas, her breath burning, the boy's small hand briefly squeezing hers before Grace passed him to a waiting bike. Bullets of rain stung their faces as they mounted up, the oath peeling out in formation, a serpent of light and sound coiling away from Willow Ridge. Tate's cruisers gave distant chase, sirens wailing through the gale, but the bikers knew these roads, the twists and flooded dips that favored 2 wheels over 4. Tommy rode with Grace, his bear clutched tight, the wind whipping away his fears as the group merged into the night. Back in the heart of Milford, the escape unfolded like a scene from a half-remembered dream, the convoy dispersing to safe houses on the outskirts, where the rain drummed on tin roofs like applause for the daring. Sarah held Tommy close in a warm kitchen, wrapping him in a blanket as hot cocoa steamed on the table. Ethan's call to Jacob confirmed the enforcer was stable, his voice over the line rough but grateful. "You brought the light, Sarah. Oath's yours now." The medallion gleamed on the counter, a symbol of bonds reforged as the storm outside began to break, dawn's first light piercing the clouds. But the chase wasn't over. Tate's web extended deeper into City Hall and beyond, where the real ledgers hid. The oath had the boy, a crack in the facade, but redemption demanded more, a full unraveling of the corruption that had tested their promises. As the engines cooled in the distance, Sarah felt the pull of this chosen family, their loyalty a shield against the shadows still to come. The road ahead shimmered with uncertainty, but for the first time it felt like home. If you're watching this, hit that like button, if a promise kept has ever changed your path. Your support fuels these tales of quiet courage. Dawn's tentative light filtered through the grimy windows of the safe house, a weathered farmhouse on Milford's forgotten outskirts where the rain had finally relented, leaving the air crisp with the scent of damp earth and pine. Inside, the kitchen hummed with subdued activity, steam rising from mugs of black coffee, the soft clink of spoons against ceramic, and the faint creak of floorboards under shifting boots. Tommy sat curled on a threadbare couch, his small frame swaddled in an oversized flannel shirt that smelled faintly of motor oil and home. The stuffed bear clutched like a lifeline in his lap. His eyes, still rimmed with the shadows of fear, darted between the faces around him. Strangers bound by a code he didn't fully grasp, but whose quiet strength had pierced the nightmare of Willow Ridge. Sarah Klein knelt beside him, her hands gentle as she checked the faint bruise on his cheek. The skin tender but unbroken, a mark of handling too rough for a child, a silent accusation against the hands that should have protected. "You're safe here, Tommy," she murmured, her voice a steady anchor amid the unfamiliar warmth. The medallion from Jacob hung around her neck now, its iron weight a talisman against the chill that lingered in her bones from the night's dash through the storm. Lily, her own daughter, had been brought over by the neighbor at first light, and now the two children played tentatively with a deck of cards on the rug. Lily's laughter a fragile bridge to normalcy. Sarah watched them, her heart aching with the duality of relief and resolve. This rescue was a victory, but the web Tate had spun reached further into the heart of the town's power structure, where promises like the oaths were tested against the grind of greed. Ethan Crow leaned against the scarred wooden counter, his salt and pepper beard flecked with drying rain. A topographic map of Milford spread before him like a battlefield plan. Grace Harlan and Lucas Reed flanked him, their vests slung over chairbacks, revealing faded tattoos that told stories of service and survival. Eagles in flight, chains unbroken. The radio on the table crackled intermittently, patched into the Oath's network, bringing updates from scouts circling the perimeter. Tate's cruisers had fanned out, roadblocks snapping up on the main arteries, but the bikers' knowledge of backtrails had bought them time. "Harlan's out of the hospital," Ethan said, his voice low and gravel rough, rubbing a calloused thumb over a marked spot on the map. City Hall, the nerve center where Victor Hale's influence coiled tightest. "Slip the restraints with help from inside. He's en route, but the suits are closing ranks. Tommy's mom is talking. Names, dates, the whole rotten ledger." Tommy looked up at the mention, his voice small but fierce. "They said Dad's gone 'cause he wouldn't pay. But Jacob promised, he said the oath would come." The words hung in the air, a child's echo of the vow that had pulled Jacob into the fray. A promise made at the father's bedside months ago, when overdose had claimed him and left the family adrift. Ethan knelt to the boy's level, his eyes meeting Tommy's without pity or pretense. "And we did. Your dad's fight is ours now. No more shadows." The simplicity of it resonated, a thread of redemption weaving through the room, binding the unlikely group, nurse, biker, child, in a family forged not by blood, but by the unyielding pull of honor. Outside, the convoy reassembled in the misty fields, engines tuned to a low purr that vibrated through the ground like distant thunder. Jacob Harlan arrived on a borrowed bike, his bandaged forehead wrapped in white gauze that starkly contrasted the ink of his tattoos, his gait steady but shadowed by pain. He dismounted with a nod to Sarah, the faded photograph from his fist, now tucked safely in his vest, the boy in the picture. His own nephew from years past, a ghost that drove his every ride. "You pulled me through," he said, voice hoarse from the night's ordeal, clasping her forearm in a grip that spoke volumes. Oath repays. Sarah felt the weight of it, the circle closing. Her act of care in the ER had ignited this chain, transforming a solitary stand into a collective force against the corruption that preyed on the vulnerable. But the respite was brief. A scout's voice cut through the radio. "Tate's got reinforcements, state boys rolling in, tipped off about the kid. They're hitting the trailer parks, shaking down for leads." Ethan's jaw tightened, the map crinkling under his fist. City Hall loomed as the next target, not for assault but exposure. Hale had buried the foster fund discrepancies under layers of red tape, payoffs disguised as administrative fees, Tate's crew the enforcers ensuring compliance. Tommy's rescue had cracked the facade, but to uproot it they needed the ledger Jacob had glimpsed before the ambush, a digital trail hidden in Hale's office, backed up by the mother's testimony, now safe in a neutral clinic across the county line. The group mobilized with practiced efficiency, splitting into teams. Grace and Lucas to flank the east approach, drawing any tails, Jacob to ride point with Tommy secured in a sidecar, rigged for the run. Sarah, unexpectedly, found herself at the map's edge, her knowledge of the building's layout from volunteer shifts proving invaluable. "The service elevator, blind spot to cameras," she offered, tracing the path with a steady finger. Doubt flickered in her eyes. Lily's safety, the risk of deeper entanglement. But the medallion's warmth steadied her. This was redemption's edge, where personal loss met communal justice. The pain of her brother's unsolved wreck, finding purpose in saving another from the road's cruel indifference. As the sun climbed, burning off the mist, to reveal the sprawl of Milford's core, the oath moved like a shadow tide. Engines whispered through alleyways, avoiding the main drags where checkpoints gleamed with false authority. The air carried the sharp tang of wet asphalt and blooming wildflowers, a deceptive calm before the ethical storm. Ethan led the core group toward City Hall, a squat edifice of glass and stone that symbolized the town's hollow progress, its flags limp in the breeze. Inside those walls, Hale paced his office, phone in hand, Tate's assurances ringing hollow as reports of the escape flooded in. The administrator's empire, built on silenced voices and diverted funds, teetered, one pulled thread, and it would unravel. Sarah rode with Jacob this time, the sidecar's hum a lullaby for Tommy, who dozed fitfully against the padding. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying whispers of the plain's vastness, a reminder that promises outlasted stone and steel. Tension coiled in her chest, psychological barbs of what-ifs, the corruption's tendrils that had cost her job, threatened her home. Yet glancing at Jacob's profile, etched with quiet determination, she saw the mirror of her own scars. Losses transmuted into loyalty, a chosen path where honor trumped fear. They arrived under the noonday glare, bikes stashed in a nearby lot, the group blending into the lunchtime crowd like ghosts in plain sight. Grace's lockpick danced on a maintenance door, granting access to the underbelly of the building, service corridors humming with the drone of vents and the faint echo of footsteps above. Up they climbed, hearts pounding in sync with the building's pulse, the air growing thicker with the scent of polished wood and stale bureaucracy. Hale's office lay at the end of the executive wing, guarded by a single secretary who blinked in surprise at Sarah's forged visitor badge, a quick oath improvisation. The door yielded to a master key from Lucas's toolkit, revealing Hale's domain, mahogany desk cluttered with files, a computer screen glowing with unchecked emails. Ethan stationed watch at the threshold, his bulk a silent deterrent, while Jacob and Sarah rifled drawers. Tommy waited below with Grace, his bear the only sentinel needed. "Here," Sarah whispered, pulling a USB drive from a locked compartment, its contents a damning archive. Transfers, signatures, Tate's name woven through like poison ivy. Jacob's eyes hardened, the proof of vindication of his crash, the ambush's motive laid bare. Alarms wailed suddenly, distant but closing, as hail burst from an inner sanctum, face ashen. "You can't," he stammered, but Ethan's hand on his shoulder stilled him, not with force, but the gravity of truth. "We already have. The ledger ends here." Sarah pocketed the drive, her pulse racing. The medallion a steady beat against her chest. This wasn't conquest by chaos, but justice poetic and measured, a promise fulfilled in the quiet click of data, exposing the rot to the light. As they slipped out, the building stirring with security's approach, the convoy reformed in the streets below, engines igniting like a vow renewed. Tate's forces converged too late, the oath melting into the horizon, the USB a spark that would ignite inquiries from higher echelons. Sarah held Lily close in the sidecar's warmth, Tommy's hand in hers, the road ahead stretching toward reckoning. Bonds had deepened, redemption inching closer, but the final stand loomed against Tate himself, where loyalty's true test awaited in the fading light. The sun dipped low over Milford's ragged skyline, painting the horizon in strokes of fiery orange and deepening indigo, as if the sky itself mourned the day's unraveling secrets. The Iron Oath convoy cut through the backroads like a silver vein pulsing with purpose, engines humming a low, resolute dirge that blended with the whisper of wind through tall grasses. Sarah Klein gripped the sidecar's edge, her fingers white-knuckled against the vibration. Lily's small hand warm in hers, while Tommy dozed beside them, his breathing steady for the first time in days. The USB drive burned in her pocket like a captured ember, its digital weight heavier than the iron medallion around her neck, a dual talisman of truths unearthed and promises on the cusp of fulfillment. Jacob Harlan rode point on his borrowed bike, bandages peeking from under his helmet, his silhouette a testament to resilience forged in the crucible of old wounds and newer loyalties. Ethan Crow's lead bike veered toward the old quarry on the town's eastern fringe, a scarred pit of red earth and jagged stone where rusted machinery loomed like forgotten sentinels. This was neutral ground, a neutral echo from their army days, where deals were struck away from prying eyes under the vast dome of stars that judged without mercy. Tate had taken the bait, his radio chatter intercepted by the Oath's network, a summons to settle this quietly, laced with the false bravado of a man cornered. The quarry's dust swirled in eddies as the bikes fanned out, forming a loose semicircle around the central clearing, headlights dimmed to pools of amber that caught the metallic glint of tools and chains. The air carried the sharp bite of clay and oil, mingled with the faint, acrid trace of impending rain, a sensory prelude to the ethical storm about to break. Tate arrived alone at first, his cruiser crunching over gravel, headlights sweeping the group like accusatory fingers. He stepped out, uniform crisp despite the day's chaos, his mustache twitching under the strain of a sneer that masked deeper unease. Flanking him from the shadows came two shadows, Hale's deputies, but the Oath knew better. They were Tate's inner circle, hands stained by the same ledgers now exposed. Ethan dismounted with measured calm, his boots sinking into the soft earth, the weight of his vest a armor of quiet authority. "You called this meet, Tate," he said, voice carrying like distant thunder rolling over the pits. "Time to lay cards. The boy's safe, Harlan's breathing. But your house of fees, it's crumbling." Sarah stayed back with the children, her heart a drumbeat against her ribs, the medallion's chain cool against her sweat-damp skin. Lily whispered questions, her eyes wide at the tension coiling in the air, but Sarah hushed her with a story fragment about a brother who rode to protect, whose loss had taught her that family was chosen in the fire. Tommy stirred, clutching his bear, his gaze fixed on Jacob, who stood sentinel nearby, the enforcer's presence a silent vow renewed. Grace and Lucas patrolled the perimeter, their steps soft on the gravel, eyes scanning for traps. This wasn't a brawl, but a reckoning, where violence yielded to the sharper blade of truth. Tate's laugh barked out, hollow against the quarry walls, but his eyes betrayed the flicker of a man who'd built an empire on fear. "You think a flash drive changes anything? This town's mine, foster kids, trailer trash, even your outlaw dreams." Harlan poked the wrong bear. He gestured to his men, who shifted uneasily, hands near radios that buzzed with unanswered calls from City Hall. Hale's exposure had rippled outward, whispers of state investigators already en route, tipped by an anonymous oath contact, a former cop weary of the rot. But Tate clung to denial, stepping forward, the scent of his aftershave clashing with the earth's raw honesty. Jacob moved then, slow and deliberate, pulling the faded photograph from his vest, the boy grinning against the dusty horizon, his nephew's memory a ghost that fueled every mile. "This is why we ride," he rasped, holding it out like evidence in a trial of souls. "Promises to the lost. Your crew took Tommy's dad with threats, buried the family in debt till he broke. That's not protection. It's chains." The words landed with poetic weight, stirring the air like a wind shifting through the pits, and Tate faltered, his sneer cracking as the younger deputy averted his eyes, the weight of complicity pressing down. Sarah rose, stepping into the clearing despite the pull of caution, the USB in her outstretched hand glinting under the fading light. "I lost my brother to roads like yours," she said, voice steady, laced with the moral clarity of one who'd healed too many scars. "In different systems, badges that blind. But Tommy's mom spoke. Names, dates, your signatures on every diverted dollar. It's over." The drive passed to Ethan, who nodded to Lucas. A quick sync to a waiting laptop in a nearby truck broadcast the files live to a secure line. Journalists, advocates, the kind of eyes that pierced corruption's veil. Tate lunged, but Grace intercepted, her grip firm on his arm, not with force, but the unyielding hold of shared humanity. "Walk away clean," she urged, her silver-streaked hair catching the last sunrays, "or let the truth ride you down." The quarry fell silent, save for the distant call of a hawk wheeling overhead, a natural judge to the human drama unfolding below. Tate's shoulders slumped, the fight leaching from him like water from cracked stone, his men stepping back as sirens wailed faintly from the highway, legitimate aid, drawn by the oath's careful orchestration. No shots fired, no fists raised. Justice arrived on the wings of exposure, the ledger's unraveling, a redemption for all who'd carried its burden. Jacob clasped Sarah's shoulder, his tattooed hand a bridge across their worlds, while Ethan watched Tate led away in cuffs, the corrupt badge finally accountable. As night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like promises etched eternal, the convoy reformed for the ride home. Tommy rode with Jacob now, the boy's head against the enforcer's back, a circle of protection closing. Sarah held Lily close in the sidecar, the wind carrying the clean scent of night-blooming jasmine, washing away the quarry's dust. Milford's lights twinkled below, transformed. Not a den of shadows, but a town awakening to its own potential for good. The oath had fulfilled their vow, not through thunder alone, but the quiet power of standing firm, redeeming the overlooked in a world that too often forgot. Back at the safe house, under the warm glow of lanterns, Tommy reunited with his mother, her arms enveloping him in an embrace that mended fractures deeper than bone. Sarah watched, tears blurring the scene, her job's loss a small price for this healing. Redemption not just for Jacob, but for the nurse who dared to care beyond protocol. Ethan raised a mug in toast, the group's faces illuminated by firelight. Veterans, riders, a family woven from threads of loss and loyalty. "To the oath," he murmured, and they echoed it, voices harmonizing like engines in perfect sync. The road ahead stretched open, free of Tate's grasp, with inquiries promising real change. Funds restored, protections genuine. Sarah slipped the medallion into Lily's palm, a heirloom of courage passed on as the first stars reflected in her daughter's eyes. Honor's legacy wasn't in glory, but in the silent acts that bound them, a promise surviving the longest nights. Milford slept, but the oath rode on, guardians of the forgotten, their thunder a whisper of justice eternal. Thank you for riding along on this journey of promises and heart. If these stories of quiet honor move you, subscribe for more tales from the open road. We'll keep the engines running.